The Tears of Gaia by Redback Spino. Chapter 23. The March begins. Even if you somehow missed the sight of the massed towers and walls that was the fortress of Brzaka, you would certainly be able to smell it from a mile away. A sulphurous mix of wood smoke, rotting flesh, rusting metals, and other odors too horrible to describe, all coming together in a stench that hung in the air all around. Once a fiery volcano many thousands of years ago, the mountain now stood quiet and unmoving, the two stretches of black stone walls surrounding its slopes, one around its base, and the other around the perimeter of the crater, and down inside the crater stood a massive round tower, which loomed out of the hole and stretched hundreds of feet into the sky. Between the walls were many more structures built into the slopes of the mountain, none quite as imposing as the central tower, still rather impressively large. Oh my gosh, they renovated the volcano of gloom! Most of them were barracks, with enough room to house nearly 10,000 Blythings. However, with the disaster that had been the assault on Servatus, a great many bunks and hammocks laid empty, with only around 6,000 stationed in the stronghold. The rest of the buildings were ramshackle prisons, mess halls, officers' quarters, everything one would expect in a fortress. And then, beneath the surface were miles of tunnels, hollowed out for the now extinct volcanic vents, with hundreds of crawl spaces and hideaways for some of the smaller Blythings, who did not require a bed or a spot in the barracks, as well as larger halls and rooms dug out of the rock. As Moggoth and the few survivors from his entourage passed through the massive iron gates of the lower wall and into the bailey, many of the Blythlings around him spoke in hushed tones. Word had reached the fortress about the massacre that took place at Servatus, and their flight from the forest in disgrace and defeat. But that was not the reason they whispered as Moggoth walked past him. Word had also reached the stronghold about what he had done to Dushatha. Now Dushatha had gained himself quite the reputation among the servants of the Blight. He was a brutal fighter, an imposing figure, and a worthless commander. He was also known as one of the most unlikable bullies many of the Blythings had ever seen, executing his troops for mere mistakes, using the weaker Blythings as meat shields, doing whatever it took to get the job done, regardless of casualties. He had never been the most popular of officers. A heavily armored Blything with a beaked face and scaly tail approached him, pointing a spear straight at his face.
Walk off! Your troops are free to go, but you need to come with us. Our father wants to speak with you.
Moggoth looked at Laka, who looked expectantly back at him.
You sure you'll be okay, sir?
The Horned Blything asked.
Don't worry. Like I said, I got a plan that works right now.
Moggoth whispered back.
You'll know when the time is right. But until then, just keep your head down and wait.
Laka nodded.
Gotcha! Good luck, Moggoth.
With deep breath, Moggoth turned to the armored god and nodded.
Alright, let's get this over with, I guess.
Jostled from behind at spear point, Moggoth began to slow trudge up the steep slopes of the mountain. It was only about 500 meters or so up a relatively gentle slope, but each step felt like 12 for him. He had no idea what the Allfire had in store for him as its new attendant, but he knew it would not be pleasant. All the more reason he would have to put his plan into action as soon as he would have the chance. He just needed a diversion. At long last, the doors of the keep swung open, and Moggoth and the guard chambered into a makeshift elevator, powered by a group of Blythings that may have been cows at one point in time, who started walking on a massive treadmill, lifting the elevator platform, creaking and swaying past lines of metal pipes and tubes that led from somewhere underground to the top of the tower.
Our father, Morgoth, has arrived!
The guard shouted as they had reached the landing. Before them stood a large doorway, guarded by two armored Blythings.
Send him in.
The deep voice rumbled at the other side of the door. The door swung open, and Moggoth was led inside. The top of the tower was one massive room, practically empty except for 2 rows of giant glass tanks on either side of the room, filled with inky blackness. A ragged carpet that led to an even larger glass tank was connected to 2 other rows of tanks by a series of metal pipes. Inside this largest tank, suspended by clancy pipes in the murky blackness, was the Allfather. At some point many years ago, he may have been a pony, or a stag, or some other creature living in the lands surrounding Brzaka, but after being captured and becoming a host of the Blight, becoming the Allfather that all Blythings looked up to as their leader and master, any semblance to any living creature was long gone. His skin was bloated and pocketed, inflated to bizarre proportions by decades of continued exposure to the Blight. His sunken eyes were rolled into his sockets, and his mouth hung open. A few traces of long, scraggly hair hung from his head and neck. Several bloated limbs stretched out, terminating in hooves, claws, hands, and even an extra eye or two. The pipes from the other tanks all connected to a mask that the creature wore over its mouth and nose, constantly feeding the black smoky blight to him, piping it in from the source that lay just underneath the bottom of the tower. There was only one word to truly describe an abominable sight. Corruption. Oh, sweet Celestia, it's a mother brain.
Magoth.
The hideous, burbling voice of Allfather rumbled from a grate at the bottom of the tank.
You are finally here. We can say with utmost certainty, Osiris the first of the black.
Narusas. Luckily for me, oh father. So then, what have you got in store for me?
Morgoth asked with gritted teeth as he bowed low before the Allfather's tank. It chuckled.
Oh, nothing too difficult. Just keeping you around where we can see you, so you do not do anything stupid. Maintaining our tanks, cleaning our tower, those kind of things.
So this is to be my life then, eh? Morgoth growled. Playing nurse and butler for you.
The Allfather said, with a hint of malicious glee.
Precisely. After all, since you failed to destroy those deer, we sent in a blessing. We can assume that by you you'll be coming here for us. So, we need our troops ready to fight.
If you need as many soldiers as you can get, why are you keeping me in here? Turning minion labor for you away from the fight, he asked.
So, our other, more capable children do not have to.
The Allfather replied.
Besides, in your absence, some of our more capable officers are obtaining some new recruits from the sands southeast. Shh. Do you hear that?
They fell silent as there came a rumbling from far below. Somewhere, deep within the bowels of the mountain below Persaka, something stirred, growling and grumbling in a voice that made the whole tower shake.
Is that what I think it is?
Morgoth whispered, both scared and in awe as he recognized the noise.
Do with them, in fact.
The Allfather said with a chuckle that made any pony nauseous.
But you needed to concern yourself with them.
Now then, time for you to get to work. No. Vic, what are they? What are they? Vic? Answer me, Vic! Come high noon that day, the south were abuzz with activity and excitement. There were few creatures who lived out on the plains, with only a few tiny hamlets and farmsteads dotting the landscape. But news travels fast between them, and soon the whole land was whispering and wondering about the massive army that was marching further south, towards lands where no creature dared to dwell. They had emerged from the forest kingdom of Servatus earlier that day, a massive column of armed and armored creatures, at least a few thousand strong. Deerfolk in their green and brown tunics and a silvery armor, antlers crackling with heresy. Griffins of all creatures marched alongside them, and few flew above them, dressed in a black and iron plate armor, in flying goggles, spears, swords, maces, clubs, and strange glowing muskets clenched in their clawed hands. And among the locals, with particularly our Sarbisite, could spot a few rather more colorful figures among the massive hosts. But their questions were answered, as Griffins split off from the army and flew to a few small settlements. They were representing the allied army of King Gideon of Phrygia and the White Heart of Servatus, the messenger said. They were gathering their forces and marching upon Berzaka, the dark fortress of the Blight, to put an end to them once and for all. The mere mention of the yellow-eyed monsters sent shivers through the hearts of many locals who had lost families and loved ones to those creatures. The messengers would continue, inviting anybody who was ready and able to fight, to come join their host and bring the accursed Blight down. Most were too afraid, or not prepared for fighting on such a large scale, but a select few joined the host. A few more families of griffins, a herd of antelopes, yes, and even a pack of diamond dogs agreed to help. For a share of the spoils, of course. The only managed to summon a few hundred of these locals to their aid, but every little help aids in the war. That evening, the darkness of the plains was dotted by hundreds of campfires as the army sought to rest. But there was very little rest to be had, as ripples of tension and anxiety engulfed the camp. There was still a good day's hike away from the fortress, and the ruddy glow of the fires visible in the distance. The highest peak of the range of low mountains and hills, I just want to take a break here and say that, during that whole marching sequence, in my mind, I started playing a woman worth fighting for. I can't help it. In one circle of tents, 6 of the 7 ponies sat around a campfire, a delicious smell wafting up from the flames as they ate.
I'm still not entirely sure exactly how you did it,
Starswell muttered, frying into a freshly baked cake.
Rainbow shrugged. It's usually not best to question how Pinky does it. It's easier that way. Trust me.
There are 10,
Applejack replied.
Besides, I ain't one to look a gift horse on the mouth when Pinky's cooking's involved, even when she's somehow making cakes and muffins out of trail mix, dried fruit, and bread!
I have my ways, and you give me a lot to work with, Pinky replied, pulling another tray of delicious baked goods off the fire. I mean, working as you can keep quiet, I'm going to improvise. When you work in a bakery, sometimes you just have to make do with what you can find. Reddy smiled. Well, by all means, keep it up. Your wonderful cooking is enough to help me forget that we're having to camp out on the ramshackle text in the middle of nowhere. Just don't run out of supplies too quickly. We still have one more night before we reach the fortress, and who knows how long we'll be spending there.
Any word yet for the other commanders about exactly what's going to happen when we get there? Applejack asked.
None, I'm afraid, Reddy replied. I think Garrett sent out some Griffin scouts to survey the fortress, see if they can spot any weak points. Not much we can do but wait for them to return. By the way, where's Twilight? If she doesn't hurry, she's going to miss these delicious delicacies.
Starswell stood up.
She's in her tent. She wanted to make use of this brief rest to do some studying of the Tears. I'll bring her some food. No doubt she's starving.
Indeed, in one of the tents surrounding the fire, Twilight sat at a makeshift desk, a few sheets of parchment scattered around the place as she scribbled down notes and sketches, opening the lacquered box for a fraction of a second to glance at the gem inside before slamming it shut, stealing it off before she suffered the same crushing effects of the tears she experienced back in the Pillars of Prasnius.
Pardon me, my dear Twilight. May I come in?
She jumped slightly at the sound of Starswell's voice, with a smile of relief as she saw him standing in the doorway of the tent, a platter of cakes levitating before him.
I thought you might be hungry, so I sent you some food.
Ah, thanks, Starswell. You're a lifesaver. I was going to come out and have a bite to eat, but I was getting pretty caught up in my research. I'm sure you know what that's like.
Indeed, he replied. So, what exactly are you studying about the Tears?
He sat down beside Twilight as he explained.
Well, with everything that's been going on, I haven't had really much of a chance to just sit down and examine it. Not being able to look directly at it for long hadn't made things much easier either. But I managed to determine what thing.
And what's that portrayal?
Well, the basic nature of exactly what it is, she replied. It's literally a reservoir of pure, raw masculinity, in, quite frankly, ridiculous quantities.
Well, it does contain combined magic of 6, well, for the lack of a better term, gods, so it's hardly a surprise that it's so powerful.
Starswell replied, looking at the box, peering closely at it.
Maybe, but still, I can't even begin to describe how much power they contain. I bet even Celestia and Luna wouldn't be able to control this magic at once.
She tapped a sketch of a gemstone on the desk.
And the gem itself is a much bigger mystery. I can't say for the life of me of what kind of crystal it is. A gem this small being infused with the sheer amount of raw magic that it contains? Even a diamond the size of a house would explode from the pressure.
It's a mystery, all right,
Starswell said with a nod.
But the myth is to be taken literally. The Tears of Gaia does that. The little tears of one of the mighty others turned into a jewel. It's hardly a surprise that its nature is a mystery to us.
Twilight groaned, popping her head down on the desk. If only Celestia or Luna was here! I could just ask them. I'm not going to be able to sleep until I've got this gemstone figured out!
Starswell laughed. Ha 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 ha! Oh, my dear Twilight. You know, you rather remind me of Celestia when she was young. I was her mentor, you know.
Oh, I know, Twilight replied, the slightest hint of a blush appearing on her cheeks. Well, I've always sort of admired you.
He stared at her, eyebrow raised inquisitively.
It's not strange or anything, Twilight sputtered quickly. I mean, when I was young, I read about you in old books on magical theory. I read about all the great discoveries you made, the spells you created. This also sounded fascinating.
Indeed it was, he replied. Of course, I spent much more time on creating new spells than exploration and adventuring. I leave that to younger, more proficient ponies. But with Celestia by my side, at least I was never lonely.
What was it like, working with Princess Celestia? And what was she like when she was younger? And just in case, you wouldn't happen to have any unfinished spells I need to know about.
Well, there is one, but I don't think you're ready to complete it just quite yet. Ho ho ho! Some of the stories I have about her, he chuckled, just as a mischievous mare as she was. Keeping her and her sister Luna under control was probably what turned my men gray. But despite all that, she was still one of the brightest, most brilliant students I ever had the opportunity to work with. Smart, curious, and always hard-working. Even if sometimes she could be a bit impulsive.
Was it a trick of the low light for a moment? Twilight wondered. Did Starswell's reminiscing smile falter?
Honestly, and in many ways, she was a lot like you.
Twilight was taken back. Really? You think I'm a lot like the princess?
Indeed, my Twilight, he replied, hard-working, studious, curious, and a tad neurotic.
Gee, thanks.
And fiercely loyal to those closest to you. It's truly admirable in a man your age.
Twilight was at a loss for words. Such high praise from perhaps the one pony she admired as much as, if not more, than Princess Celestia. Thank you, she said in a low, humble voice. Coming from you, that means a lot.
I consider it an honor to be on this adventure alongside such a pony. Sarswell added, "It is almost like being with Celestia once more." Sadly, when she and Luna resurrected me, time was of the essence, so there wasn't much time for a reunion.
Twilight shrugged as she shuffled her notes into a neat stack. Well, once we get back to Carolot, I'm sure they'll be overjoyed to see you once again. Starswell the Bearded, one of the most greatest unicorn wizards alive again, working alongside the princesses. There was this time no mistaking it. Starswell's face sagged as the smile disappeared.
I'm not so sure a reunion will be possible.
What do you mean? Twilight asked. Starswell sighed, his lips cranking and cracking as he got up.
The resurrection spell the princesses cast upon me was only temporary. I'm not really alive anymore. Brought back to life for good. Rather, I've been reanimated. Given a small portion of magic to keep my body and mind alive temporarily. And when my task is complete, and we're all back in Equestria, well, I'm not sure if you noticed, but since our party was separated after the fight with the Blight, I've not taken off my cloak once.
With a foreleg, he swept the hem of his long blue cloak aside, the bells jiggling lightly as he did. Twilight gasped as the cloak unveiled Starswell's body. His face had changed a little, but his torso was emaciated and frail, even more so than normal. Papery skin and ragged patchy fur was drawn tightly against his protrusive ribs, marked with age and the first signs of decay.
Already, I'm beginning to slowly fade. I predict that I will last until we return to Equestria, but not a day longer.
Twilight rested a forehoof on his shoulders. Starswell, I'm so sorry. He paused for a moment, as if deep thought shrugged.
It's all right, my dear Twilight. As I said, it has been an honor to be revived and sent on this quest alongside you and your friends. I see why the princesses hold you in such high regard. And as for me and my inevitable fate, do not be too concerned. When I passed on to my final reward all those centuries ago, I was lucky to die simply of old age. When you know it is coming, it's not nearly as scary as you imagine. In fact, I found it's rather like falling into deep sleep. And when my task is complete and I return to my tomb, I will welcome that deep sleep again.
Twilight stepped back to Starswell and smiled at her. Remind me how we got from studying the tears to discussing the nature of morality exactly? Starswell laughed again.
Come now, my dear Twilight. These things warrant discussion. You're talking to some pony who has literally died and remembers what it was like. Take this opportunity by the horns, my girl! Ask away with whatever you wish you know. Pardon me! I hope I'm not interrupting.
Both unicorns turned to the opening of the tent, where the massive head of Gellert poked through.
I'm hoping to talk to you for a moment.
Of course, come in, Gellert, Twilight said, stepping back to give room. Gellert gazed into the cozy tent, bowing to the pair of them.
So, Commander, what can I do for you?
The Griffin sat down on the ground.
I was hoping to have a word with you about those Tears of Gaia, if I may.
Twilight could already feel the situation becoming more tense. I thought you had said you were no longer interested in using the tears for your people.
And that's still the case, he replied. But I'm still curious about the stone. 2 questions, Miss Twilight. First of all, what do you know about the tears? What have you found out about it?
Twilight looked nervously to Starswell, who must for her to continue. Well, aside from what I've already told you, I know it's a sort of reservoir or container for a, quite frankly, incredible amount of masculinity. The lesson states that the gemstone is infused with the combined magic of all the others, and after studying it, I believe it.
Sounds like quite a lot of power, Keller said. Indeed, Starswell continued. And what's more, The jewel itself does not share the properties of any other known gemstone. I'm sure, as someone who has used magic-infused gems before, you can understand how unstable they could be. Gellert nodded.
Well, with as much magic as this one jewel contains, Twilight said, levitating out the box, it should be incredibly unstable. That much magic compressed to a single point as small as this? That gem should have exploded long ago.
Griffin nodded again in understanding. I see. And that leads nicely to my second question. Now, I don't mean to sound accusatory or interrogative or anything like that ilk when I ask you this. Why do you think Equestria should hold that much power?
And there it was again. The nervous tension that always seemed to follow any conversation Twilight had with Gellert. So thick a knife could be cutting through it. Well, Gellert, please understand that Equestria would never intend to use it as any sort of weapon or to gain leverage over other nations.
But then what do you intend to do with it?
Twilight hesitated. Well, I guess study it. Trying to harness its power in a way that can make everyone benefit from it, pony and non-pony alike.
Well, that makes sense, Gellert replied. But why should Equestria get to hold it? Why not any other nation? After all, according to your legend, the tears were made for the benefit of all life, as a way to preserve the memory of Gaia, correct?
And that's exactly the reason, Twilight said, sitting down. The tears were created by the others, and the only two others left in the world are Princess Celestia and Princess Luna. So, shouldn't the tears go to them?
Gellert frowned. Perhaps. But then, if they get to hold on to it, then who dictates how its power should be distributed? How do we know its power can be divided equally? If it can't be, then who would get more power? And for that matter, how can anyone be certain someone else will try to use its power for ill reason?
Twilight opened her mouth, but again found herself in a rare predicament for her. She was lost for any answer. Gellert raised some good points. As much as he would like to think otherwise, not everyone was inherently pure of heart, not even the ponies of Equestria. How could she be so sure in the future some calamity or disaster would push Equestria to use the powers of tears for their own gain, regardless of its effect on the rest of the world? Gellert got up, heading back to the entrance.
I don't want to start another fight with you and your friends, Twilight Sparkle, but we are getting close to the Blight Source, so I advise you to be very careful with that little gemstone. And I advise you to think very quickly about what will be done when this war is over. After all, you hold the power of gods in that little box. No one creature should hold that much power.
And with that, he pushed the tent flap aside and departed, leaving Twilight and Starswell in deep thought. Applejack, on the other hand, went over to Rarity's tent. Land, Rarity. It must be hard for you living in such, quaint conditions. It's rustic and outdoorsy. I know. And the tent that they gave me was barely accommodable for my taste, but I remodified it somewhat. Rarity led Applejack into her tent, and at that point, Applejack's jaw dropped at the sight. All across the tent what looked like the inside of a palace, with jewels, couches, sofas, chairs, tables, fridge, and an air conditioner. Heil! When does you? I think he had to make some modifications here and there, but I thought it was done close. I made this tent look exactly like home. Can't you stop by for a drink? No, I'll just be outside. Thank you. How does that mayor do it? I swear, she was just giving that to you a few days ago.